Mr. Speaker, I rise to wind up this debate on this very important piece of legislation that is before the House today. And I would like to thank the members who have contributed to this debate for their words of support and encouragement. The seconder of the bill from Navis 11 gave us a perspective as to how this would assist us tremendously in our federation to make the management of lands, the registration of lands, the ownership of lands more efficient, more effective. And I would also want to thank the member for St. Christopher 6 for a very interesting perspective on terms of the land registry. And he has evoked certain images and has raised certain issues, historical issues that moves me to add to some of what he has said. Just to correct, I believe, a statement that the honorable member has made or implied in relation to our celebration of Emancipation Day and the fact that, as he claims, young people were celebrating Emancipation Day in Independence Square on the weekend and seem to suggest that the government was not somehow took it out on these young people. I would tend to say the government of this country is very much supportive of anyone who would want to celebrate Emancipation Day in our country. Our country is predominantly black. We all feel a connection with our past, and we would want to remember it. But what happened on this weekend was that there were misguided young people who felt that on this very important day, the celebration, that they would want to raise a protest about vaccination. And that has nothing to do with emancipation. And I think we need to put that in its proper perspective. And secondly, that as a country that is clearly one that believes in the rule of law, it is the cornerstone of this administration, Team Unity, and of democratic society, as the member for number 6 says. If someone wants to express a dissatisfaction in our country, it is clearly established, Mr. Speaker, that one should apply to the police for permission to have such a demonstration. And the member for number 6 is quite aware of that, because he was the Minister for National Security, Prime Minister for a number of years. And that had to be done under his tenure.
Even when you have a labor demand,
it was well known, Mr. Speaker, that last week the police issued a statement publicly, urging those who wanted to take any action of such nature should apply. And this was ignored. So I just wanted to put that context there and to go and speak to some more of what he said, because I think the member for number 6 has really helped in this debate, this discussion, and I want to thank him for a number of points he has raised. He has dealt historically with the journey of our people from emancipation in 1834. He spoke to the apprenticeship period that went to 1838 before our citizens embarked on their own to have their own lives and livelihoods in our society. And it was a struggle for ordinary black people in our country, as he so clearly established. I want to jump forward, though, Mr. Speaker, to the Sugar Lands Acquisition Act of 1975 that he mentions. A very important point. The government of the day was faced with a difficulty. The mainstay of our economy at the time was sugar production. And sugar production or cultivation was in the hands of private estate producers. He referred them as, and I agree with him, the plantocracy. They had been assisted where planters owned lands and they had been going. And some of them were inefficient, very inefficient, to the extent that our forefathers, our people who worked in these sugar lands did not make necessarily, we did not have a good standard of living. We struggled and so forth. But because the sugar owners owned the vast majority of land in the country, there's very little for post-emancipation for us to move to develop. And we know, of course, in 1970-71, the government of the day introduced the Sugar Industry Rescue Operation, SIRO, to be able to help to manage the sugar industry. That there was an agreement with many of the owners of the plantations to continue the production. And after 2 or 3 years, the owners determined that they would offer the government their lands for sale. But there was a problem about the price. And that really is the issue. And in 1975, when the Sugar Lands Acquisition Act was passed, the government determined that they would buy the sugar lands that were under cultivation so that they could develop it. This was pre-NACO. NACO came later, but this was on the SIRO and then we moved to that. And in 1975, an act of our predecessor parliament would have passed. And it's interesting that we talk about that because it's part of what we're doing here today. The Sugar Lands Acquisition Act, there was no survey done. There was no survey done. In other words, there were no clear boundaries of what land should be taken in. It was based on what was called a McMahon map of 1828, where you had some 50 estates would have been acquired by the government to become government lands. The government of the day offered $4 million for all of those lands in St. Kitts, where the owners did not agree And it is important to note that while successive governments would have made significant contributions to our country, he did not mention the fact that it would not until 1986, that the successor People's Action Movement government paid the sugar owners for that land. $22 million was paid, and that is how the government get title for those lands, to be able to give the people land. It's an important thing. So we must have the whole history, and those who went before have to be commended for their contributions to the development of this country, but we should have the whole history. It's an important issue, because subsequent to 1975, people moved off the estate lands. Remember, you have an estate land, and you have small slithers of it on the boundaries. That evolved over the years, over the hundreds of years. That is why St. Kitts is so designed. You check those villages as we go around the island, and the down by the coast and the island main road, because that was where the sugar estates allowed some of their workers to have some land. And as a youngster, I don't want to date myself, but I'm sure the member for number 6 would recall that you see, all in the 60s, you see on a weekend or Saturday, people got a little chattel on the back of a truck. When somebody throw you off, they want to throw you off your land, off your spot, and you move around. And it's that struggle, I think, that we all understand, but there was not ownership. And even in 1975, after the act was paid, because the Sugar Act requires you to compensate. The Sugar Lands Acquisition Act, that is still part of our books, requires you to compensate if the government acquires at market value, at the values established. And it would not have been until another 10, 11 years before that happened. And during that period, people started to move to government lands. And you'd have a piece of land, and you had in effect a letter, an IOU, because you couldn't pay. You couldn't get title, because there was not title for that land. People moved and squatted. They took possession of the land. And Mr. Speaker, it's important to understand the part of the process we do here today is to move forward to get our country in order, to order it. And there are a number of ways we can do so. The member number 6 quite rightly spoke about the village fuel lands. That was an important piece of legislation for people who had lived in villages, and it was an easier way to accommodate them to have ownership. But there are other forms of ownership in terms of possession, long possession, and so forth, that are part of our common law, part of our statutory framework. There is, Mr. Speaker, therefore, a significant part of the country which the government has control over and owns. There is a significant part of our country where we have a number of people who would have registered land. But there are also lands that are unregistered. And so, if we have in some parts, somebody might have been living on the land since 1975, 76, or even before. They might even have built a house, a wall house, and they want to borrow money from the bank. but they don't have title to that land and that property. Because the land not registered. And after 30 years, long possession, nobody disturb you. There should be an opportunity for you to make a case to get proper title. So that the process by which we are going through at this time, this government, is one, to ensure that land registration is done properly, that it is ordered and proper, so that somebody who wants to borrow money can have title to go to the bank. You can have a mortgage, and it is put on the title and it's there registered. You have caveats, so you can't do certain dealings with the land. There are documents that go along with the title, the indefeasible title, the certificate of title that you have. And so there is a lot of work to be done. A lot of work has been done, but a lot more to be done to ensure that our economy is straightened out, that people get proper titles in a manner in which it can be done. And as the economy has grown, as there much work has evolved, the court system has expanded, we get additional judges. You found that more and more work is slowed down. And there would have been some delays. And one way to ease that was to establish this dedicated land registry that we talk about. And we have seen that since there has been somebody targeting land issues, that this has happened in our country, that the Registry of Lands, who could now focus on lands only, with the Registry of the High Court, had so many other things to do, manage the court sessions, have to deal with jurors, have to deal with the judges, have to deal with probates. There are a number of functions that our justice, our judicial system, justice and legal affairs system, that we have had over time to create other registries of intellectual property with new registrars. And so the system, as we move forward, is to help us to be more efficient, to be more effective, to help our country to grow in a proper way. I note, and I thank the member for number 6 for that. It's important for us, and for him too, to remember that just a few years ago, because of this same land acquisition in 1975, the fact the government has this land, that we found some sort of maneuver to be able to cover some of our excesses in a government that we had between 1975 and 1995. The what? The land for debt swap you're talking about? Well, I was sort of mentioning that we are fortunate to be able to have some of this land, that we came to this parliament in September of 2012 to be able to have a very cute maneuver where we had a land for debt swap, where we had excess in the management of the country between 1995 and 2010, 2011, where we had how many billions? Billions of dollars in debt. You know what I mean? And we had to be able to make a correction. And after 2010, of course, you had things like water. The price of water went up 600%. price went up. A lot of people who never used to pay water suddenly pay water. Take up standpipe off the road and so. A lot of poor people. Yeah. Electricity jumped 86%, 85%. Churches had to take haircut. Huh?
Yes.
You understand?
Yeah, that's part of it.
To the mismanagement of the economy. You understand?
Yeah.
And so, Mr. Speaker, it's important to understand that this question of land and land management and what we do it is that we are trying to address that. This government, this in-administration government, is trying to address this legacy that we have had. Of course, we paid off the IMF. So they woke up this deal with the previous government. Pay them off. Clear that. And we straighten out little mess by little mess by little mess. Well, we're clearing off the land. We're getting back the land for the people. For the people.
For the people.
For the people. You understand, Mr. Speaker? Land is a precious commodity. And it is for our people, young people, all our people to understand that it is a critical resource. And your youngster coming out of school, you should be aiming to own your own piece of the rock. Of course. And we are putting in place a system for you to be able to make sure that you have properly registered land that is there. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy for the support for the member for number 6 and for the whole of the Parliament on both sides. But this is an important piece of legislation. And just to quickly indicate again that shortly the land registry building will be ready. We should be moving in, start moving in maybe next week. But by the end of August, early September, the dedicated land registry should be in place in the former CNC building on the 2nd floor. We will continue to ensure that the registration, the transfer of land, is done efficiently in both St. Kitts and Nevis, that the time which now has been reduced in some cases to days and weeks, on average, not more than 2 months. Once there are no hiccups, no errors that need correction, we will continue to ensure that this very critical part of our economic activity is done effectively and efficiently. And as I would have mentioned earlier, to assist us in doing so, we have been grateful to the Republic of China, Taiwan, to help us support the digitization of the land registry. The first phase of this digitization, the land administrative information system, the title search, is complete and ready to roll out and should be launched when we would launch the opening of the building. And it means that practitioners, attorneys, members of the public, banks, inland revenue, and all those who work in land management, surveyors, should be able to do title searches online effectively, efficiently. The second phase of the land administration information system would allow the registration of titles, the registration of parcels of land, from a practitioner's office, that you can approach the registry and to be able to interact with them online to have your titles registered. At the end of it, you'll still be issued a physical copy of a certificate of title. That copy, the original stays with the registry, the physical copy goes to the proprietor or proprietors. But this is a very important advance in our country. I mentioned that there are still some aspects of this process to be completed and to be straightened out, to be more efficient, and that has to do with the payment online. Initially, there is still a process that goes through, may still require initially a physical payment, but that will be, we are assured, would be shortly corrected and improved upon. A very exciting part of this process of digitization and improving on this land management, going back to 1975 and the work from the land, sugar lands acquisition and coming forward to where we are today, is the work to establish the cadastre, to have a cadastral survey. Cadastre is a map that registers the legal interests of all those who own property on it. It is a real-time map that has to be updated daily as transactions, as people try to register, as you try to find out who owns which land, what interest there is. And we drive around St. Kitts and Nevis. We drive through villages, we see empty lots of land, we see derelict buildings, and you ask a question. It's difficult sometimes to find out who owns what. You may want to be enterprising and get into business. You may want to be enterprising and purchase a lot. What our process is going to do is to make it more efficient, easier, to help that type of economic activity. And as was mentioned, as we go forward into the new year, we'll be developing a project where a surveyor, along with a lawyer, attorney, will go and the team to ensure that we get the legal metes and bounds, identify the parcels, the neighbors, evidence will be taken. Some of it is straightforward. Some of it requires that there is an adjudicator who will determine the actual outcome. Of course, there'll be avenues of appeal to the court and so forth. But it's an important process of a cadastral survey to establish this legal basis of the maps of our country. And so it's exciting. I should point out that over in Nevis, this will also be done. Some of it has already been done, going back some years, and has been in abeyance. But we will ensure that we coordinate our activities to ensure that both in Nevis as in St. Kitts, that we would be able to ensure that land management, land administration in our country is effective and efficient. It's very, very, very important that people have the confidence and trust that the titles, the property that they have is indefeasible, certainty as to ownership. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would want to thank again the seconder to the bill and the member number 6 for their contributions that they've done today in support of what we do. And to all the members of the Honorable House as we look for safe passage of this bill at this time. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.